Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 1.
In the spring of 1998, a young couple, Daniel and Mara Whitmore, left the chaos of Chicago behind and bought a century-old farm in rural Iowa. The property, known locally as the Hollinger Place, came with 120 acres, an old weather-beaten barn, a farmhouse with sagging porches, and a strange silence that even the wind seemed to respect. Locals had whispered about it for years. Strange disappearances, livestock mutilations, and the family that once lived there vanishing without a trace in the 1960s. But the Whitmores were dreamers, and the price was unbeatable. They moved in mid-April. Mara, pregnant with their first child, spent her days cleaning out the musty home while Daniel tackled the overgrown fields. The first oddity appeared on their second night when Daniel found the barn door open after he had chained it shut earlier. Inside, the old loft was filled with dead birds, more than 50 of them, stiff and contorted like they had fallen mid-flight. Mara begged him to burn the barn down, but Daniel brushed it off as just some freak event. As days passed, the farm began to show its teeth. At night, they would hear thuds coming from the attic, but every time Daniel checked, he found nothing. Footsteps in the hall outside their bedroom became common. The baby monitor crackled with faint static and, more than once, what sounded like a woman humming an old lullaby. The song would stop the moment one of them entered the nursery. By the end of May, Mara's demeanor changed. She seemed distracted, distant, and often stared out of the upstairs window toward the barn for hours. When Daniel asked what she was looking at, she only replied, "She's waiting." Then, one night, Daniel woke up to find the bed empty. He rushed downstairs and saw the front door wide open. The moon was full, casting silver light over the fields. In the distance, he saw Mara, in her nightgown, slowly walking toward the barn. He ran after her, calling her name, but she didn't turn. As he got closer, he noticed something strange. She wasn't walking right. Her legs moved stiffly, like a puppet being guided by strings. When he reached her and grabbed her arm, she snapped out of the trance, screamed, and collapsed. She didn't remember walking to the barn. When they got back inside, Mara finally confessed something she hadn't told him. Since they moved in, she'd been having dreams of a woman in the attic, tall with long black hair covering her face, whispering things like, "Feed the soil," and "Bring the child." Terrified, Daniel called the county records office to dig into the history of the property. What he learned chilled him. The Hollinger family, the original owners, had 5 children. In 1961, they were suspected of participating in ritualistic practices. Townsfolk found dozens of animal carcasses buried in perfect spirals around the barn. The family vanished the following winter. No bodies were ever found. One theory was that the family believed they could summon something or someone through blood and sacrifice. Determined to leave, the Whitmores packed their belongings within a day. But on their final night, just before sunrise, Mara woke Daniel, gasping in pain. She was going into labor weeks early. With no time to get to a hospital, Daniel helped deliver their daughter right there in the house. But something was wrong. The moment the baby was born, all the power in the house went out. The air grew heavy, dense. Then they heard it, soft footsteps in the hallway. Daniel grabbed a flashlight and opened the door. At the end of the hall stood a figure, tall, slender, with long black hair draped over its face. The flashlight flickered, and in the split second of darkness, she moved several feet closer. Daniel slammed the door shut and shoved a dresser against it. The whispers began again, louder now. The same lullaby that played on the baby monitor filled the room, though it came from nowhere. As dawn broke, the presence faded. When Daniel dared to open the door, there was nothing there. But down the hall, leading toward the attic, were wet footprints. They left that day. Left the farm, their things, even the car. They flagged down a truck on the main road, not looking back. A year later, the farmhouse caught fire and burned to the ground. The cause was never determined. What's strange, though, is that the barn didn't burn. It still stands, untouched, weather-beaten, and silent. People say that sometimes on foggy mornings, you can still hear a lullaby coming from it. And if you walk too close, you'll feel a tug, soft at first, then stronger, pulling you toward the loft, where the birds still fall.
Story number 2.
In the fall of 2004, a veterinary student named Aaron took a temporary job on a remote family farm in Nebraska. He was promised room, board, and decent pay in exchange for helping with livestock treatments during calving season. The farm belonged to the Kessler family, an older couple, Warren and Irene, and their mute adult son, Dale. From the moment Aaron arrived, something felt wrong. The land was too quiet, no insects buzzed, no birds called. The animals, mostly cattle, avoided people, and their eyes had a wild, almost human terror behind them. At night, the wind carried a strange whistling sound, not like any animal Aaron had ever heard. It echoed across the fields, rising and falling like someone crying in a distant hollow tone. Aaron's room was in the attic of the farmhouse. The stairs creaked with every step, and the ceiling sloped at odd angles, making him feel like the walls were slowly closing in. On his first night, he found a tiny wooden figure tucked under his pillow, carved roughly, almost childlike, in the shape of a man with a wide screaming mouth. Assuming it was some local superstition or prank by Dale, Aaron tossed it in the trash. But the next night, it was back on his pillow. This time, the figure's mouth had been painted red. He brought it down to Irene the following morning. She took one look at it, went pale, and ordered him never to speak of it again. Things escalated quickly. One morning, Aaron found a cow dead in the pasture, gutted from the inside, but with no external wounds. Its eyes were missing. Dale stood nearby, staring blankly at the carcass, clutching another of those carved figures, this one with antlers sprouting from its head. Aaron was disturbed, but when he tried to call into town for help, he discovered that all the phone lines were dead. His cell had no service, and the old truck he'd driven in was missing its distributor cap. Irene said it was best he stayed put for now, and suggested he make peace with the land. One night, unable to sleep, Aaron ventured outside with a flashlight. The cattle were all huddled together in the farthest corner of the field, trembling. As he scanned the flashlight around, the beam caught movement near the tree line, something tall, hunched, watching. Its eyes reflected yellow, but not like an animal's. They blinked sideways. The next morning, Warren told him, without prompting, that his land was cursed, that his great-grandfather had stolen the land from a group of Lakota families during the Homestead Acts, and that a woman, rumored to be a healer, had placed a warning on the ground before she was driven off. "She said the soil drinks blood now," Warren said. "If it ain't fed, it takes what it wants." Aaron wanted to leave, desperately. But with no working vehicle and the nearest neighbor miles away through unfamiliar terrain, he felt trapped. Irene began preparing meals for 3 people, though Dale was never seen at the table anymore. Aaron found scratches on the inside of his bedroom window, like fingernails trying to claw their way out. 3 days before he was supposed to finish his work and leave, Aaron woke up to find Warren gone and Irene sobbing in the barn. When he asked where her husband was, she said only, "He went under." That night, Aaron heard someone walking above him in the attic, which was impossible. His room was the attic. The steps moved across the ceiling, slow and heavy. Then they stopped, directly over his bed. He couldn't breathe. The air was thick, humid, and carried the scent of old earth. When he finally dared to look up, there was nothing. The next morning, Aaron packed and set off on foot through the cornfields. He didn't care which direction he went, but as he walked, he noticed something horrifying. Every few hundred feet, there was a wooden figure tied to a cornstalk, each more grotesque than the last. Twisted faces, missing limbs, mouths filled with dried grass. Somewhere behind him, something large followed, hidden in the rows. After nearly an hour, he emerged onto a dirt road where a passing truck picked him up. He never looked back, didn't speak until they reached the next town. When he told the sheriff, they investigated the Kessler farm the following week. There was no trace of the family. The barn had collapsed inward, like it had been sucked into the ground. The cattle were gone. The corn had rotted. But in the attic of the house, the deputies found dozens of those carved wooden figures arranged in a circle. And in the center, something written in a child's handwriting. "The land was hungry. It's full now, for a while." Aaron never returned to rural work. He wouldn't even drive through farmland. And sometimes when he dreams, he hears the whistling again, soft, rising through the wind, reminding him that the soil never forgets.
Story number 3.
In the fall of 2007, a farmhand named Elias took a job at an isolated property deep in the Ozarks, in a town so small it didn't even show up on most maps. The owner, Mr. Holbrook, was an old, leathery man who wore the same denim overalls every day and spoke as little as possible. The farm was known as Cold Pine Acres, though there wasn't a single pine tree on the property. Just dry fields, rusted equipment, and a weather-stained farmhouse with a boarded-up second floor. Elias needed the money and didn't ask questions. He was told not to touch anything in the attic and to never go near the root cellar behind the barn after dark. "Things settle strange on this land," Holbrook said one night, sipping from a chipped mug, "and some things don't like to be stirred." The work was easy, but strange. The cows avoided a particular corner of the field, always circling wide around a patch of scorched grass. No matter how much Elias tried, nothing grew there. Even the birds avoided flying over it. One night, curious, Elias walked out to the patch with a flashlight. The soil felt hollow beneath his boots, like he was walking on a drum. When he kneeled to inspect it, he noticed small bones poking through the dirt, too small for livestock. Maybe too small even for animals. He told Holbrook, but the old man just stared at him, his mouth tight. "Leave it be. Don't feed it your attention." A few days later, Elias was cleaning the barn when he noticed the root cellar door was open. He swore he hadn't touched it. It was always padlocked. Now the lock lay on the ground, snapped clean in half. From inside came a sharp, sour smell, rot, blood, and something else he couldn't place. Against better judgment, he stepped down into the darkness. The cellar walls were lined with shelves of old jars, preserves maybe, but most were unlabeled. Some were filled with cloudy liquid and what looked like animal parts. One shelf had dozens of small glass jars, each holding a perfectly preserved human tooth. The ground in the center of the cellar was dug out into a shallow pit, and at the very bottom, Elias saw a bundle of rags. When he reached down with the flashlight, the bundle twitched. He stumbled back and ran, slamming the cellar door and stacking crates on top of it. When Holbrook returned that evening, Elias confronted him. The old man didn't deny anything. He just said, "They were here long before us. This land's got memory. It don't forget what it was fed." Elias packed to leave that night, but the truck wouldn't start. He slept with a rifle beside the bed, the air outside thick with the scent of wet soil. Around 2 a.m., he was jolted awake by the sound of something dragging across the porch. Then came the tapping on the window, soft, rhythmic, almost polite. He stayed perfectly still, barely breathing. The next morning, there were muddy handprints on every window, each one too long with too many fingers. The soil by the front steps was torn open, like something had crawled out. Elias left that day on foot, never looking back. A year later, someone else bought the farm. No one's heard from them since. Cold Pine Acres is still out there. Locals say the land hums if you stand quiet enough, and if you dig too deep, it might remember you.